Another Crab's Treasure is amazing. Now, before we get started, there's two things that I want to point out. Firstly, this review is going to be as spoiler-free as possible. I'm only going to be using footage from the first 2 hours of the game. For context, it took me about 13 and a half hours to beat it. I'm not going to show or mention any later game plot points or boss fights. Everything I show and directly mention are things that can be seen in trailers and from the dev's social media videos. Also, Another Crab's Treasure is just kind of a long name, so for this video, I'm just going to call it Act, so bear with me. Act took me about 13 and a half hours to beat, and I had an absolute blast. I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me is just how original everything felt. I've never really played a game like it. I've played platformers, I've played Souls-likes, I've played like everything in between, and just the mixture of everything together came out beautifully, and I really think that they made something special here. Now, they being Aggro Crab, the indie studio responsible for Act, I've been following them and this game for a while now. You know, it kind of went from me watching funny videos that Aggro Crab would post to this game legitimately being one of my most anticipated games of 2024, as you can tell by me coming out of YouTube retirement to make this video. I heard about this game years ago, probably about 2 years ago, just from progress updates on social media from the devs, and it just kind of spiraled and spiraled, and I got more and more excited with every trailer, with every dev update, every teaser. It was awesome, and it very much lived up to the hype for me at least, and it's a game that I think almost everybody who is interested should definitely give a shot. It was awesome. It was very much worth the money, and that's what I'm going to get into here. I'm going to start with the good. The game just feels great. The movement, the platforming, the combat, they're all very smooth and silky. The animations are polished and crisp, and it really helps when telegraphing enemy attacks. Some of the older Souls games, or just certain Souls-likes, it can be really hard to telegraph enemy attacks, whether it be just the animation's a little janky or the frame rate, the game just doesn't look as good. With this art style, everything is so distinct, everything sticks out, so it's very easy to tell what's coming, to be able to decipher enemy attacks. That doesn't mean that the game is easy, it's more so that the game is fair, which I think is a highlight. I've beaten Elden Ring, I've beaten Liza P, I've played through Sekiro, I've played a lot of these really tough games, and I honestly thought this game would kind of be a cakewalk. It wasn't a cakewalk. Now, it wasn't impossible, you know. I got stuck briefly on a couple boss fights, but for the most part, it was pretty standard. And some boss fights were really easy, but I don't think the game is unfair at all. I played it on the standard difficulty, which is just hard, but they do have lowering difficulties and some fun accessibility modes that I think makes this game very accessible for everyone. Even people who have never picked up a Souls-like before or aren't used to that kind of combat system. I think the game is very fair and very rewarding. Going back to the animations, I never had anything that felt really clunky, other than like a few wonky camera angles or like camera flicks. Everything did feel very streamlined and smooth, which is really impressive coming from an indie studio of only 12 developers. It's really impressive how good they were able to make this game feel. Now, just as a whole, Act is just very charming. You know, even from the very first scene, it kind of shows off its charm between the art style, the fun voice acting, the text dialogue, which is a huge highlight for me, you know, goofy shell designs, and way more. The game is just immensely charming. It's pleasing to just look at and play. It really was a breath of fresh air for me, you know, as someone who's played a lot of these dark, grim, kind of similar style games. To have something that looks so colorful and playful and upbeat and charming, like, it just was such a breath of fresh air. It was so nice to play through. Now, as for the story, it kind of goes as follows. So Krill, the main character who you play as, gets his shell stolen by a debt collector, a shark debt collector, after not paying his taxes that he never even heard of. So he then has to leave his home to embark on a journey in the ocean to get his shell back. And it's insanely simple, but honestly, it's perfect for a game like this, and I never had any complaints about the story. The characters I did learn to care about. You know, as a whole, it was just kind of really funny, goofy, but really fit the game's theme really well. Now, my favorite part about this game easily has to be the upgrade systems. Between the different shells you can get and set as your main respawn shell through shell insurance, which is just funny. All the shells you can collect, the weapon upgrades you get, and my favorite part, so going in, it was announced that you would only have the one weapon and you would just upgrade that weapon throughout. So I was a little bit disappointed by that. I thought that only having the one weapon would limit variety, but I was really wrong on that front because of the hammer feature that they introduced. So almost every shell can be attached on the end of the weapon to make it into a hammer, and they all handle differently. There's different weights, there's different animations. Like, it really did enhance the variety of the fork weapon, which I loved. It was so much fun to kind of experiment with different hammers and different combinations, and sometimes I honestly just preferred to use the weapon on its own without any attachments because of the speed or just like the animations that I was used to. But everything that there is to collect and upgrade, it was just a blast to go through and try to get all of them. So throughout my normal playthrough, like I said, 13.5 hours, this is without looking up any guides, this is without looking anything up, just kind of playing through the game and finding things as I come about them. I got 60 out of 69 shells. I upgraded my weapon, not all the way, but one away from max. I got all of the adaptation abilities, except for one. I maxed out my skill tree, but even with me beating the game, there is still stuff that I missed, and there's still stuff to expand upon, which is just great. There was so much to look forward to, so much to spend your microplastics on, so much to upgrade and experiment with, and, you know, there was so many new things that I always wanted to try out. It just made it a blast to kind of not know the next enemy that I would run into. You know, who knows what shell I'd be using, what weapon I'd be using, what skills I would have to defeat that enemy. Like, it just had so much variety, and it made every single chapter of the game feel so unique. Couple things that I missed from my playthrough. Like I said, I missed about 9 shells, but I also missed 4 boss fights. Moving on to a couple criticisms that I have with the game. It definitely has some flaws that I wanted to mention. You know, nothing game breaking. I wouldn't recommend waiting for further updates. I think the game is very, very rock solid as is, and 100% worth your time and money as is. But there's still a couple things that I noticed throughout my playthrough that I wanted to mention. In beating the game, I beat 14 out of 18 bosses. Now, that's perfectly fine because it is nice to have side bosses that maybe are hidden or that not everyone will find, because it just kind of adds layers and variety to the game. But my one problem was that one of the side bosses, and this is a minor spoiler, but not really, one of the bosses gives you an ability, but that boss is not on the main path. Now, this ability is kind of used everywhere in the game, but I beat the game and never got this ability. I missed out on costumes, weapons, you know, upgrades, like stuff like that, shells, because I didn't have this ability because it wasn't on the main path. And trust me, this game rewards you for exploring, and I explored a lot. I always love to go off the main path and see what kind of enemies there were, shells there were, all that kind of stuff, costumes especially. But I missed this boss. You know, I never ended up finding him throughout my playthrough, so I never got that ability, and that's something that I kind of wish was more veered on the main path so that every player would get this ability. It's not necessary, obviously, to beat the game, but it is still a big ability that unlocks a lot of things, and I kind of didn't like that that was hidden on a side path. The other ones are fine, you know, you can leave them, but this one, I kind of wish it was a main boss. Certain enemy animations were a little bit finicky, where it would cause some unfair hits when it comes to them being above or below you, and their animation would kind of glitch out because of it, whether it be they would teleport through the floor during their animation to hit you, or they would just hit through the surrounding terrain. There were so many times where I would not hide, but use the terrain to my advantage and just kind of get hit through it. The worst was on some platforming sections when enemies were above or below me. I noticed that was a bit janky. I would get hit through obstacles, or I just felt like I got a lot of unfair hits like that, which did cause some annoying deaths, but it wasn't so bad to the point where I think it's game breaking. It just happened occasionally with certain enemy types, and it was a little bit annoying. Other times I noticed that with the camera's fine and very smooth, but there were certain times where the camera would flip around really aggressively, or it would lock on to an enemy who was already dead, and that would kind of throw me off, because then I'm not obviously looking at the enemy that I'm trying to fight, and he would get a hit on me or something like that. You know, I've noticed some weird camera movements even into the walls or surrounding obstacles, just kind of hindered me at times. Now, these are all minor, and it's things that I know will be updated, but just through my first playthrough, that's kind of the main complaints that I have. Really not much. I love this game. I'm absolutely going to be playing through it again when they add the new Game Plus feature in a couple months. I can't wait to go back and get the things that I miss. I'm still going to 100% the game before they add new Game Plus, but I'm excited to go through, get everything on a single playthrough now that I'm more comfortable and kind of know what I like, but also am more able to branch out into other styles of play. Also, I forgot to mention earlier in the good section, the costumes are fucking amazing. I love the costumes in this game. There are so many fun costumes. There are some cool looking ones, some funny ones. There are so many costumes and even some shells that kind of shout out other games and other forms of media that are sometimes funny, sometimes just really cool. I loved all the costumes, and the costumes were actually my favorite thing to collect over shells or upgrades. I loved finding and buying new costumes. Also, the hub world where you can buy some shells and costumes and just kind of go around and talk to people. I loved the hub city. I thought it was beautifully done. It's one of my favorite hub cities in a game like this. But overall, you know, it's difficult, but it's not impossible. You know, it's a game I really think is worth your time, even if you're not big into games like this with this kind of combat style. Like I said, there's accessibility options, there are difficulty sliders, and it's a game that I just really hope that people don't overlook. It's a game that I hope to see continued support for, and with it being so cheap at only $30, as well as it being on Xbox Game Pass, I think it is an amazing time that you won't regret investing your time and money into. I know I didn't. I was so excited to get my hands on this game, and I am so excited to say that it did not let me down. Overwhelmingly positive. So many more positive things to say about it than negative things. I had a great time, and seriously, I cannot wait to go back and play through it again. So anyways, with that being said, that is all I have. This is a bit of a different style video, something that I've been thinking about doing for a long time. Whether it gets views or not, don't care. Doing this for myself, and had a lot of fun. So thank you for watching if you did. Leave a comment if there's another game that you'd like me to talk about. And yeah, have a great day.